It started with a glimpse. I was tidying up in the dim light of my apartment one chilly autumn evening when I noticed something strange in my bedroom mirror. At first, I assumed it was my tired eyes playing tricks on me. I had been working long hours at a job that drained every bit of my spirit, and I was hardly surprised when my vision blurred at the edges. But when I looked a second time, I saw that the reflection wasn't quite right. The face looking back wasn't entirely mine. There was a subtle distortion, a flicker of another presence lurking behind the contours of my own expression. That night, as I lay in bed with insomnia tugging at my sanity, I couldn't stop replaying that unnerving vision in my mind. I had inherited the mirror from my grandmother, a beautiful, antique piece with a carved wooden frame that told tales of old-world charm and mystery. It was something I'd always admired in family photos, an heirloom that spoke of generations past. But that night, it seemed less like a cherished relic and more like a window into an alternate reality. The following morning, determined to understand what I'd seen, I sat down in front of the mirror. I adjusted the lighting, fumbled with my phone to record a video, and even tried to gently wipe the glass, half expecting smudges to be the culprit. Yet nothing changed. My reflection appeared perfectly normal for a few seconds. Then, when I paused, I caught a fleeting image of a pale, gaunt face hovering just over my shoulder in the reflection, its eyes dark and sorrowful. I whipped around immediately, heart pounding, yet the room was empty. I told myself it must have been a trick of the light, the result of exhaustion. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that the mirror held secrets I was not meant to see. Over the next few nights, the odd occurrences escalated. I would catch glimpses of the figure whenever I wasn't paying full attention, at the corner of my eye, reflected in a window, or in the wavering image of my computer screen. One particularly restless night, I lay awake staring at the mirror. The familiar comfort of my reflection was gone, replaced by a stranger. My eyes met eyes that weren't entirely my own, features that seemed to blur the line between my identity and something unknown. The face in the mirror was intermittently overlaid with faint images, shadows of a long-forgotten sorrow, hints of a life I never lived but somehow recognized. It was as if the mirror held a portal to another existence. I began to research my family history in an attempt to uncover any mention of a cursed heirloom or ghostly phenomena linked to that mirror. My grandmother's journals, yellowed with time, spoke of peculiar dreams and mysterious visitations, but nothing explicit about the mirror itself. Still, she mentioned a vengeful-looking glass in passing, a term that chilled me to the core when I saw it written in her spidery hand. I combed through old letters, searching for any clue that might connect the dots. At times, sleep evaded me for nights on end, replaced with mind-racking anxieties and a persistent feeling of being watched. One evening, overwhelmed by a mix of dread and determination, I decided that confronting this phenomenon head-on was my only option. I set up cameras around my room to monitor every angle of the mirror. The first night of recording was uneventful. The footage showed nothing but my solitary, restless sleep and the ordinary ambience of a quiet apartment. But on the second night, something extraordinary happened. I awoke at 3:17 a.m., heart galloping, to the sound of soft scratching coming from behind the mirror. My eyes struggled to adjust in the darkness as I fumbled for my flashlight. When I shone its beam on the glass, I noticed faint, ghostly traces that looked like handprints scratched into the surface. They were too shallow to be real damage, yet they pulsed with a strange luminosity, as if alive. The following days became a blur of investigation and paranoia. I rewatched the footage repeatedly. In one segment, I saw the mirror's surface ripple as if disturbed by invisible fingers. My own reflection lagged behind my every movement, a slow, eerie delay. In another clip, the camera captured an entire sequence where my reflection's eyes darkened dramatically, and in one frame, I could swear the reflection was not mimicking my movements at all. Instead, it seemed to act independently. its head slowly tilting as though it were surveying me with an intelligence that was not mine. The more I watched, the more I began to believe that my mirror was more than just a piece of antique glass. It had become a conduit for something beyond ordinary comprehension. Sleep became a distant memory. The relentless horror of the mirror plagued my waking hours and taunted my nightmares. I tried to cover it up with a heavy blanket to hide from the unsettling visions it invoked, but that only seemed to worsen my isolation. Every time I removed the covering, the mirror greeted me with the unnerving possibility that something was waiting, something that was not me, but was an echo of me, an alternate version contorted by sorrow and regret. Desperation led me to confide in a close friend, Mark, whose rational mind had always been my anchor. He listened carefully as I described every detail, the inexplicable delays, the ghostly handprints, and the disembodied expressions. Mark suggested that stress and sleep deprivation might be amplifying my imagination, urging me to get help. I attempted to explain that it wasn't just my mind playing tricks. The evidence on the footage was irrefutable, but his skeptical eyes left me questioning if I was truly losing grip on reality. I began to wonder if I was experiencing a form of psychosis. However, one particular incident shattered that thought completely. One stormy, pitch-black night, I awoke to find the mirror completely dark. Not a trace of my face, nor any reflection of the room, only an impenetrable void. Panic surged through me. I fumbled to turn on all the lights, yet nothing changed. Slowly, as I sat terrified before this endless blackness, a movement caught my eye. From within that void emerged a shadow, a dark, wraith-like shape that approached with a deliberate slowness. It wasn't until the figure was nearly upon me that I saw the faintest glimmer in its eyes. They pulsed with an otherworldly light that made my blood run cold. I wanted to scream, to run, but I was paralyzed by the relentless grip of fear. The shadow lingered, examining me with a silent intensity that spoke of centuries of despair. Then, just as silently, it receded back into the darkness, leaving the mirror as empty as if nothing had ever been there. The next morning, drenched in sweat and shaking uncontrollably, I forced myself to confront the mirror once more. I could no longer ignore what I had seen. I began an exhaustive documentation process, scribbling down every detail in a journal, noting the exact times of occurrences, and describing the ghostly features with painstaking precision. I even attempted to capture the moment using different cameras and settings, hoping that technology might offer an explanation. But each attempt only deepened the mystery. The mirror began to change its behavior subtly. On some days, it would show a flicker of a face from behind me. On others, it would seem to swell with a dark energy that pulsed in sync with the rhythm of my heartbeat. One particularly dismal afternoon, while leafing through the margins of my grandmother's old journals, I discovered an entry that chilled me to the core. The entry described a ritual of remembrance, a way for a restless spirit to communicate with the living. It mentioned that if a family heirloom, especially a mirror, did not reflect one's true self, it was because it was absorbing the soul of someone who was lost and yet still tethered to that world. According to the diary, the mirror would gradually reveal the image of the departed if the current occupant paid close attention. I felt as though each word was addressed to me, a warning or perhaps an explanation. Had this mirror been cursed long before it came into my possession? Was it possible that by merely gazing upon it, I was inadvertently inviting a lost soul into my life? The thought both fascinated and terrified me. Driven by a morbid curiosity and a desperate need for answers, I began to experiment. I stood before the mirror day after day, trying various rituals I found in the margins of old occult books, lighting candles in a circle around it, reciting spoken affirmations of remembrance, and even leaving objects that belonged to my family as offerings. In the quiet moments after these rituals, I sometimes caught fleeting glances of a face that wasn't mine, a young woman with sorrowful eyes and a faint smile of resignation. Her presence was neither malevolent nor protective. It was as though she existed solely to be acknowledged, to be remembered. As the weeks turned into a blur of sleepless nights and feverish investigations, I found myself becoming increasingly detached from who I had once been. My reflection, or rather the lack of it, became a daily torment. I would stand for hours in front of the mirror, watching as the comforting image of my own face wavered, replaced over and over with that mysterious, spectral visage. There were moments of eerie clarity when I almost believed the mirror was trying to tell me its story, a tale of loss, betrayal, and an unfulfilled promise that stretched back generations. I began to piece together fragments of a tragedy. A young woman named Isabella, whose life had been cut tragically short in a fire that consumed an old estate, leaving behind only whispers and scraps of her spirit trapped within the mirror. One night, emboldened by a sudden surge of determination, I addressed the mirror directly. "Who are you?" I demanded in a trembling voice. The silence that followed was heavy, laden with innumerable unspoken words. Then, in a voice that was not my own, but resonated as if from deep within a forgotten grave, the mirror replied, "I am she you lost. I am the one whose memory you dare not forget." The voice was sorrowful and ancient, echoing off the walls of my mind. It sent a shiver of both fear and pity through me. I felt tears streaming down my cheeks as I whispered back, "I will remember. I promise I will never forget." From that moment, the mirror's behavior changed ever so slightly. While it continued to play tricks on my mind in the dead of night, the spectral images became less erratic. There was a quiet rhythm to them now, a mournful cadence that spoke of deep, unending regret rather than pure malice. I began to understand that the mirror was not a monster to be vanquished. It was a relic filled with memories, a conduit for a lost soul desperate for acknowledgement. In its silent, reflective depths lay the ghost of a life abruptly ended, waiting for someone to listen, to remember, and perhaps to set it free. I dedicated myself to uncovering Isabella's story. I pored over county records, old newspapers, and family letters that had been tucked away in dusty attics. Over months of painstaking research, I assembled a mosaic of her life, a young woman of beauty and passion, whose life had been marred by misfortune, scandal, and ultimately an untimely death in a fire rumored to have been no mere accident. Every clue I unearthed deepened my connection to her, and with every new fact, I felt the mirror's presence grow stronger, more resolute in its silent plea for remembrance. Some nights, as I sat alone in the flickering candlelight, I would feel her presence like a gentle caress, a reminder that Isabella's spirit was now a part of me. I began to see her not as a haunting specter, but as a tragic figure whose story demanded to be told. I created a small scrapbook filled with clippings, personal letters, and carefully transcribed interviews with people who remembered the old estate. I wrote down everything I discovered, and in the quiet spaces between my frantic research and weary sleep, I talked to her as if she were present, a conversation between a solitary soul and one lost in the annals of forgotten time. One particularly stormy night, when the wind howled like a chorus of mourning voices and rain battered the windows of my apartment, I made one last attempt to commune with the mirror. I arranged the items I had gathered, a faded photograph of Isabella in her youth, a weathered locket that had once belonged to her, and an old letter expressing her final, desperate hopes. I sat before the mirror, now illuminated solely by the erratic dance of lightning outside, and spoke softly. "I have not forgotten you, Isabella. I promise your story will be heard. I will remember you, even if the world has long since cast you aside." For several agonizing minutes, the silence held me captive. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, the mirror's surface shimmered, and in that fleeting moment, I saw not my own face, but Isabella's. The sorrow in her eyes mingled with a gratitude so palpable it nearly moved me to tears. In that mystical exchange, I felt the crushing weight of decades of neglect and heartache lift ever so slightly. The mirror had served its purpose, not to terrify, but to remind me of the fragility of memory and the importance of bearing witness. And so, as dawn broke over a rain-soaked cityscape, I vowed to honor her legacy. I compiled everything I had learned into a small manuscript, a chronicle of her life and the dark secrets that had bound her to that cursed mirror. I shared her story on forums, in local historical societies, even with acquaintances who had once dismissed my ramblings as mere paranoia. Gradually, her tale began to take on a life of its own, a bittersweet blend of tragedy and remembrance that resonated with all who heard it. Now, years later, I still live with the echo of Isabella's sorrow. The mirror remains in my bedroom, a constant, silent witness to my efforts to remember. And sometimes, on quiet nights, as I lie awake and gaze into its depths, I see her smile, a small, fleeting expression of peace, as if finally freed from the shackles of a tragic past. I know that I carry a responsibility, not just to myself, but to all those lost souls whose stories are bound to the objects we inherit. The mirror that once failed to reflect me now reflects something more, a shared humanity, a connection between past and present, a reminder that in the silent corners of our lives, memory and loss often walk hand in hand. As the seasons change and I grow older, the terror of that mirror has transformed into a profound sense of duty. I have learned that even the most unnerving phenomena can hold within them a message of hope and redemption. Isabella's spirit, once trapped by the cruelty of fate, now lingers as a gentle reminder that we must never forget the stories of those who have been erased by time. In every scratch on the glass, in every fleeting flicker of shadow, there is a whisper urging us to remember, to acknowledge the beauty and tragedy of lives that once burned so brightly. I often wonder if others have experienced similar encounters with heirlooms or artifacts that bridge the gap between the living and the dead. Perhaps, in some quiet attic or forgotten room, there exists another mirror that does not simply reflect one's image, but offers a passage into hidden histories. For me, Isabella's mirror has become a daily meditation, a source of both terror and solace. And as I continue to care for it and keep her story alive through my writing and research, I take comfort in the realization that even in the darkest reflections, there can be light, if only we dare to remember. The mirror that didn't reflect me is my testament to the intricate tapestry of memory, loss, and the indomitable human spirit. In a world that often forgets too quickly, the most haunted mirrors may well be those that hold the faces of the forgotten. And if you ever find yourself facing a mirror that seems not to reflect you at all, pause for a moment, listen to its silent language, and remember that sometimes the past reaches out for acknowledgement in the most unexpected ways.